Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and from the from the second canto, from the 9th chapter, the verse is number 7. So, would you like to?
Nimasya tadvrtradidrakshayo diso Nimasya tadvrtradidrakshayo diso Vilokya tatranyadapasyamanaha Swadhishnayamastaya vimarsya tadditam Tapasya upadishta iva dademanaha Nismaya tadvaktradidrakshayo disa Vilokya tatranyadapasyamanaha Swadhishnayamastaya vimarsya tadditam Tapasya upadishta iva dademanaha Nisamya tadvaktradidrakshayo diso Vilokya tatranyadapasyamanaha Swadhishnayamastaya vimarsya tadditam Tapasya upadishta iva dademanaha Anybody would like to try?
Thank you. Anyone else? Ladies? Nishamya, after hearing tat, that, vaktir, the speaker, titrikshaya, just to find out who spoke, Disha, all sides. Vilokya, seeing. Tatra, there. And yet, any other. Apasya mana, not to be found. Sitish yam, on his lotus seat. Ashtaya, sit down. Vimirashya, thinking. Tat, it. Hitam, welfare. Tapasi, in penance. Upadishta, as he was instructed. Eva, in pursuance of. Adayahe, gave. Mana, attention. And here is the text. When he heard the sound, and he is referring to Brahma. They're talking about Brahma in this section of the second canto. When he heard the sound, he tried to find the speaker, searching on all sides. But when he was unable to find anyone besides himself, he thought it wise to sit down on his lotus seat firmly and give his attention to the execution of penance, as he was instructed. And the commentary, the purport by Srila Prabhupada. To achieve success in life, one has to follow the example of Lord Brahma, the first living creature in the beginning of creation. After being initiated by the Supreme Lord to execute tapasya, he was fixed in his determination to do it. And although he could not find anyone besides himself, he could rightly understand that the sound was transmitted by the Lord himself. Brahma was the only living being at that time because there was no other creation, and none could be found there except himself. In the beginning of the first canto, in the first chapter, the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it has already been mentioned that Brahma was initiated by the Lord within. The Lord is within every living entity as the supersoul, and he initiated Brahma because Brahma was willing to receive the initiation. The Lord can similarly initiate anyone who is inclined to have it. As already stated, Brahma is the original spiritual master for the universe. And since he was initiated by the Lord himself, the message of Srimad Bhagavatam is coming down in disciplic succession, and in order to receive the real message of Srimad Bhagavatam, one should approach the current link or spiritual master in the chain of disciplic succession. After being initiated by the proper spiritual master in that chain of succession, one should engage himself in the discharge of tapasya, in the execution of devotional service. One should not, however, think himself on the level of Brahma to be initiated directly by the Lord from inside, because in the present age, no one can be accepted to be as pure as Brahma. The post of Brahma to officiate in the creation of the universe is offered by the most, is offered to the most pure living entity, the pure living being. And unless one is so qualified, one cannot expect to be treated like Brahmaji directly. But one who can have the same facility, through unalloyed devotees of the Lord, through scriptural instructions as revealed in the Bhagavad-Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam especially, and also through the bona fide spiritual master available to the sincere soul. The Lord himself appears as the spiritual master to a person who is sincere in heart about serving the Lord. Therefore, the bona fide spiritual master who happens to meet the sincere devotee should be accepted as the most confidential and beloved representative of the Lord. If a person is posted under the guidance of such a bona fide spiritual master, it may be accepted without any doubt that the desiring person has achieved the grace of the Lord. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Ittanamani Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pachani Nirvasesha Sinyavadi Paskata Disatani. Let's just say the verse again. I'll say it and please repeat. When he heard the sound, he tried to find the speaker, searching on all sides. When he was unable to find anyone beside himself, he thought it wise to sit down on his lotus seat firmly and give his attention to the execution of penance as he was instructed. So there's a number of questions here. What sound are they talking about here? Actually, Brahma, he found himself in the middle of 1,000-petaled lotus flower. The lotus flower actually opened up, and Brahma was sitting there. He looked around. He had 4 heads, so he didn't have to turn his head so much, but he looked around in the 4 directions. And there was absolutely nothing. Everything was in darkness. There was no sun, no moon, no stars, nothing whatsoever. So Brahma was a little confused. He was thinking, what am I going to do? And so he tried to find out the nature of his situation. And he felt around the lotus flower, and then he climbed down the stem of the lotus flower. And then as he is climbing down lower and lower, then he hears the sound, tapa, tapa. So Brahma is thinking, tapasya. Tapa is the seed of the word tapasya. And so he understands that this is a message. And he goes back to the top of the lotus flower, and then he sits down in tapasya, in meditation. And as he's sitting there, then he has a vision of what he's supposed to do. He has a vision also of Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, and of the glorious nature of the spiritual world. This is all explained in Brahma Samhita, in the 5th chapter. This is the only remaining chapter from the Brahma Samhita that we know of. And there it explains, Brahma himself explains the vision that he received of the spiritual world. And so he begins from the instructions that he receives from the Lord within the heart. The Lord is residing within everyone's heart. So actually, there's 3 Vishnus. There's Karanadaksha Vishnu, who's presiding over the material world. And actually, as he's breathing out all of the universes from his pores and from his breath, all of the universes are emanating. And as the universes expand, then Brahma enters into each and every single one of those universes. And here he is known as Garbhadak Vishnu. So Garbha means egg. The universe is like a self-contained egg. And we cannot see the other universes. Whatever we see in the material world, all of the galaxies are contained in just one egg. And so there, Vishnu expands himself into Garbhadaksha Vishnu. And there he's lying on the causal ocean. And from his navel is coming a lotus flower, is growing and growing and growing, and it opens up. And there in the middle of the lotus is Brahma. And also Vishnu expands himself for the third time as Kshirodaksha Vishnu. Kshira means some cream, some milk. And so in this material world, actually, there's a spiritual planet of Kshirodaksha Vishnu, where Lord Vishnu is residing in the middle of a milk ocean. And that Vishnu expands himself into each and every one of our hearts, the hearts of all living beings. Vishnu is guiding them, not guiding them, but he's accompanying them through the material world. And so it's up to us. Do we want to be guided by the Supreme Lord Vishnu? Vishnu is residing within our hearts. We can turn to Vishnu. Just like it explains, Brahma here also in the beginning of creation, he also turned to Vishnu, and Vishnu told him, tapa, perform some tapasya. And so in our age, the tapasya is not so difficult. You know, in previous ages, if one wanted to become self-realized, then they would have to go into the forest or up into the Himalayan mountains. They would have to leave everyone and everything behind, whatever they considered valuable, whatever they considered dear to them, their families, their children, their friends. They would have to go away from society and go up into the mountains or deep into the forest and there perform tapasya. But fortunately for us, in this age, it's not so difficult. We can stay with the family and with the society. We have so many responsibilities. But Prabhupada said what we have to include, the tapasya in this age, is the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so just like Lord Brahma, Brahma, his tendency, his nature is to want to create something. And so we all have that tendency. We all have that nature that we want to create. Maybe we're creating a family. Some people are creating a business. Other people are creating a garden. Some people are creating a beautiful painting. Whatever you're creating. But Brahma, he also created, but he didn't manufacture the materials that he used to create. Prabhupada explains, just like somebody who's building a house, they're not manufacturing the materials. They gather the materials together and then they build a house according to their own ability. And even one who is a painter, there's so many famous painters, Van Gogh, but the painters, they did not create the canvas, they did not create the paints, but they're using the canvas, they're using the paints, they're using the brushes to create a beautiful painting. And so in the same way, we're all want to create something, but we have the materials. We need to have the materials that are already available to create. So where are the materials coming from? This is explained that Brahma, he attained the materials from the Mahatattva. The Mahatattva is the residue where all the materials, the materialistic things, the different materials are available. And according to the nature, the intelligence of Lord Brahma, and according to our own intelligence, then we're also creating something. So Brahma, he only has 4 heads. But there's some Brahmas in different universes that have 10 heads, or 100 heads, or 1,000 heads. And so those universes are much more sophisticated, much more elaborate than the universe we live in here. And the funny thing is that the universe that we're living in, it's very bewildering to begin with. The nature of the material world is very perplexing and bewildering. And this is one of the simpler universes. So we can imagine how perplexed and how what a fantastic phantasmagoria so many other universes have. But in any event, we're trying to maneuver. The living entity is trying to maneuver through the material world, doing the best they can. And they want 2 things. They want happiness. They want to draw some happiness close to themselves. And they want to avoid any distress. They want to avoid any problems. But you know what? Prabhupada says that's not possible. The happiness and the distress are coming simultaneously. Prabhupada says no one wants problems. No one's begging, no one's desiring to have some problems in their life. But you know what? The problems are coming. We're not asking for the problems. So Prabhupada also explains that in the same way, we don't have to struggle so very hard for our happiness. Because just like the problems and the difficulties are coming, also our happiness and the satisfactions of life, they'll also come. They're coming in different ways. So we don't have to strive and be in anxiety. The living entity, we're in so much anxiety. We want to avoid the difficulties. We want the happiness. So this generates so much anxiety in the living entity. But we don't have to be in anxiety. Prabhupada is giving us this warning. Just focus on our devotion in our lives. Not that you have to abandon your job, not that you have to abandon your family, but focus on serving God, on serving Krishna within our lives. This is a wonderful secret. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad-Gita that we have to perform our duty in life, but he cautions one thing: don't be attached to the results. The results will come one way or another. Don't be attached. Just perform your duty in life. So this is a very integral, a very profound understanding. And this can actually help us to lift us out of the material world. This understanding. Prabhupada said, I read an interesting story just recently by Shruta Kirti. Shruta Kirti was Prabhupada's servant for many years. And Prabhupada had a bell in his room. And whenever Prabhupada rang the bell, then Shruta Kirti would come in. So one day, Shruta Kirti heard the bell, and he came in. And Prabhupada actually was reading from the Bhagavad-Gita. And he was reading, and then when Shruta Kirti came in and he offered his obeisances, and he looked up, and Prabhupada, he looked up from reading the Bhagavad-Gita. He said, "This Bhagavad-Gita is so wonderful. If you read this Bhagavad-Gita, you will perfect your life." And then he was mentioning one or two other things. And then he went back to reading the Bhagavad-Gita. And so Shruta Kirti understood, okay, now Prabhupada is finished with me, I can leave the room. So Prabhupada just called him in, just to give him that one insight, how valuable the Bhagavad Gita was, how important to read the Bhagavad Gita, and it will we'll be able to perfect our lives just by reading this one book. Prabhupada said, you don't need to read hundreds and hundreds of books. This book, reading it by itself, you'll attain all success and all perfection in life. And a couple of months later, the same thing happened. Prabhupada was ringing the bell, Shrutakirti ran in, and again Prabhupada was reading. This time he was reading the Nectar of Devotion. And Prabhupada was so satisfied, and he looked up at Shrutakirti and he said, this book brings such great satisfaction. If you read this book, everything will be revealed to you. You'll perfect your life. And Prabhupada looked at Shrutakirti, because Prabhupada knew that Shrutakirti, maybe he was very busy serving Prabhupada, but also you should find a few minutes out of the day to read these holy books. And Prabhupada knew that Shrutakirti wasn't much of a reader. And so a couple of months later, again, Prabhupada rang the bell. Of course, when Prabhupada rings the bell, there could be so many other reasons. But again, Prabhupada was reading. This time he was reading the Krishna Book. Who has read the Krishna Book? Anybody? This is a very valuable book. Of course, if you need to read one of Prabhupada's books, the best thing is to start with Bhagavad Gita, as it is. But here now, Prabhupada is saying, and of course, the Krishna Book, I think we have the Krishna Book available. And so Prabhupada was reading the Krishna Book. The Krishna Book is the stories from the 10th canto. The 10th canto is all about the stories of Krishna and the various pastimes of Krishna growing up in Vrindavan as a little boy. And so Prabhupada rang the bell, and again Shrutakirti came in and he offers his respects. And this time Prabhupada said, this book is so wonderful. You have to read this book. If you read this book, you'll perfect your life. And Prabhupada says, even if you read one chapter of the Krishna Book, you will perfect your life. And then Prabhupada, he didn't go back to reading. He was looking intently at Shrutakirti. And Shrutakirti was becoming a little uncomfortable that Prabhupada was looking so intently at him. He was thinking, well, Prabhupada will go back to reading, but no, he didn't. And then Prabhupada said, you don't even have to read one chapter. Even if you read one page of the Krishna Book, you will perfect your life. And Prabhupada again continued to look at Shrutakirti. He didn't take his eyes away. He was looking at him very intently. Prabhupada said, even if you can't read a page, even if you read just one line of the Krishna Book, you will become perfect. And then Prabhupada's final advice, even if you read only one word, if you understand one word from the Krishna Book, you will perfect your life. And then Prabhupada went back to reading the book. So Shrutakirti understood. Now Prabhupada has dismissed him. He has made a very specific point. And so, just like in this purport that we're reading today, Prabhupada, the first sentence of the purport, to achieve success in life, one should follow the example of Lord Brahma. And so, conversely, actually, if we want to achieve success in life, we also have to follow the guidance and the example of Srila Prabhupada. He was, even though he wrote the books, he was still reading the books. He was relishing the books. He was finding new inspiration in reading his own books. Because Prabhupada said, they're not my own books. These books are coming from Krishna. And so we also have to follow the example. If we want to become successful in life, we have to follow Prabhupada's example, chanting Hare Krishna and reading the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad-Gita. Once a devotee, he wrote a letter to Prabhupada early on in the movement. And the devotee was saying in the letter, he wrote, all glories to Sankirtan, all glories to Prasadam, all glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. And so Prabhupada thanked him. When Prabhupada replied to the letter, Prabhupada says, thank you very much. That yes, you have focused on the most essential things. This is the foundation of the Hare Krishna movement. To focus on chanting. The devotee said Sankirtan. But whether Sankirtan also means to go out in the public and chant. We're also doing kirtan here in the temple in front of the deities. Also we have the japa mala. We can chant on our japa beads. This is all chanting the holy name, kirtan. So Prabhupada explained that years and years earlier, one of his godbrothers, this is back in the 1930s, the Gaudiya Math, sent one of Prabhupada's godbrothers to England to preach there. And he received an allowance from the Gaudiya Math, from his guru. Prabhupada's guru was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And so Bhaktisiddhanta was very hopeful that this devotee would go to England. They supported him every month. I think they gave him 700 rupees. At that time, 700 rupees is a lot of money. 700 rupees, you can't even buy so much today. But anyways, that Prabhupada mentioned in the letter, that devotee, he was only giving lectures. He really didn't have a complete program that he was offering. So Prabhupada understood that after 3 years, that devotee that was sent to England only made one devotee that he brought back to India. But his mission was considered not so successful. So Prabhupada said that I want my mission to be successful. Therefore, I need to have a well-rounded presentation, not just lecture. That's only one aspect. Lecture means Krishna Katha. Lecture means discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam. No, but he needed a well-rounded... So the devotee who was sent to England, he never had kirtan with people. He thought it was too embarrassing that, to chant. These people were very upper crust people, very elite people. And so Prabhupada, no, he wanted to include the chanting, he wanted to include the discussion, the Krishna Katha, and also he wanted to distribute prasadam. So in a few moments, we'll also participate in the last of the three major foundational aspects of Prabhupada's movement. So this is the well-rounded thing. We experience through chanting. We engage our mind through study. And then we also engage our senses, the tongue, through tasting, relishing the Krishna Prasad. And that's the purpose of coming on pilgrimage. You know, sometimes people travel for hours and hours and hours to come here, and they may come and see the deities, and then they go away. But the real purpose of pilgrimage is to totally immerse oneself. So to take darshan of the deities, to chant the holy name, to hear some Krishna Katha, to relish prasadam. So we must thank you for participating, that you've come here and participated, just like Srila Prabhupada wanted, in this movement, of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. This is Prabhupada's mission. So we are only, on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, the devotees here, they are developing and maintaining this community not for their own pleasures, but for the pleasure of the pilgrims. And so we hope you enjoy yourself here in Vrindavan, and that you're relishing, and that you can take this experience home with you, share it with other people. That we shouldn't keep this experience to ourselves if we're having a good experience. If you're not having a good experience, please say something, so the devotees can make some adjustment if you're having some problem here in Vrindavan. So this is very important, that we want you to have a very favorable, a very meaningful experience, because people come an awful long way to drive here into the middle of nowhere. So I must thank you again. But in finishing our discussion this morning, are there any final thoughts or questions? I think I had one other point that I wanted to make. One last point. Because, Prabhupada, when we set out on a path, we're pilgrims. So we know where we're going. We're going to the holy place of pilgrimage. So also when you begin your spiritual path, we actually should understand what is the goal of our spiritual journey. Where is it taking us? And this is all explained in the Bhagavad-Gita. So we encourage you, please take this Bhagavad-Gita. Prabhupada called the Bhagavad-Gita, his translation, as it is. Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Because Prabhupada has said, many people, they translate the Bhagavad-Gita, they commentary on Bhagavad-Gita, but they don't explain Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Because Krishna is constantly saying that I'm the goal of life. Let me just finish by offering a few verses. Just practically in every chapter. Let me just at the end of the 5th chapter, Krishna explains, this is one of my favorite verses, although I'm no Sanskrit scholar. But Krishna says, the sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material misery. That's such a beautiful verse. One who knows Krishna, who understands Krishna, will attain peace from the pangs of material life. And then in the very next chapter, this next chapter, number 6, is all about yoga. But at the end of this chapter, again, Krishna comes to the same conclusion. Let me see here. Of all the yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So, let me do one more. This is I think the next chapter. Let's see. Let me jump ahead. I'll go to the end. Because Krishna, whatever he says at the end, when you are talking, you're having a long conversation, and whatever you're saying at the end is a little bit more important than what you find in the rest of the discussion. So here in the 18th chapter, Krishna explains, this is a very famous verse. And this is so important. Krishna explains this verse twice. Once in the 9th chapter, and it's so important. Now he's repeating it again, almost word for word, at the end of Bhagavad-Gita. Manmana bhava mad bhakto, madhyaji nam namaskuru, nam evaishya satyam te pratijane priyos sime. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. So, this is some wonderful insight, some wonderful what Krishna is saying here. Krishna is telling Arjuna, why am I giving you this knowledge? Because you are my dear friend. And he also mentions in another place the qualification, because you are not envious. So, if we can put aside our envy, if we can see Krishna as our dearmost friend, residing within the core of our hearts, then Krishna automatically will bestow so much knowledge upon the sincere seeker of the ultimate goal of life. So these are all interesting and very important things. So I encourage you, if you don't have one, get Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita as it is. I've read other translations, and very often they're almost saying the same thing. They're saying the same thing, the same types of translations, but what the other authors do is they steer you away. They take you away from Krishna. Here, Prabhupada is taking us directly to the lotus feet of Krishna. So you have to look at that yourselves. But anyways, again, thank you so much for your kind attention. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Sankirtan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. We will serve breakfast prasad behind Srila Prabhupada in our prasadam hall. We will just bring it in. We are a little early, so please be patient. And thank you again, as Sankirtan Prabhu said, for visiting the holy Dham. Hare Krishna.
Can I ask you a question?
Excuse me?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
So I really want to know, I'm vegetarian, and I often get asked this question that, like,